Well, the pagans couldn't believe what the Christians had made of their mystery religions and mystery cults and so on. And their worship. I mean, Roman society accepted all religions. Did you worship the emperor as well, of course? I mean, he's born of God, you know, miraculously born as well. Except that this Jesus, this particular leader, was personifying completely all the myths, and apparently did all the miracles that all their gods in myth had done. Well, they didn't know whether this was Monty Python or whether it was a religion for masochists and judgmental people. I mean, it was an absolute farce. Now, you could say there was a certain intolerance to Christianity because Christianity basically said everybody else was going to hell. This didn't make for a peaceful society, and I mean, we've seen nothing but war ever since. Perhaps we saw a lot of wars before too. But you see what I mean, don't you? This religion was a farce to the pagans, and rightly so. The Jesus story is not that. Not remotely. Doesn't accept all this rubbish. He says, all that ever came before me were thieves and robbers. He's not talking about the mythological religions around. He's talking about Judaism. He's talking about the God of Genesis. You know, behold, I make all things new. I mean, if you come to the book of Revelation, if that's your cup of tea, it says categorically, I give them a new name. Everything's new name. You know, it's not that everything was good. You know, God looked around on the seventh day and said to himself, my goodness, this is all good. What glasses was he wearing at the time? You know, the animal kingdom in the Garden of Eden. Do you mean there was no killing in there? How do these animals live? Do they all eat, you know, oranges? I don't think so. What did the snake say? You surely not die. There's no death with an eternal God. You change, yes. Take off this body, you could put on another, and perhaps you don't bother, you do something better. This wasn't a wonderful creation made by a wonderful God. It turned out to be a God that was willing to drown the lot. This is Monty Python. Can't you see that? The snake is right. And what does Moses hold up in the wilderness? A snake. Symbol of wisdom. Sophia, female, God of wisdom. Quite simply, you got the wrong God. You can't have Jesus and the Judaic religion that was before it. Well, it wasn't Judaic, it was contaminated with pre-Babylon. I mean, even the Babylonian view wasn't too good. You know, where do you think this notion of, you know, the good God and the bad God, Satan, comes from? It comes from Persia, it comes from Babylon. There's no mention of that before. It's the next stage. You know, there's the Promethean stage of Moses. Takes them out. It takes them away from a God that's like Pharaoh, frightening autocrat. And Babylon brings, angels and demons and a war in heaven and the millennium, 1,000-year reign of the good and 1,000-year reign of the bad alternately. Two gods. And a Promethean Moses that actually turns into something like Jesus' figure. The church has devoted itself to a soup of ancient religions and has desperately formulated a theology that harmonized it all together and stirred it up and serves it in one catastrophic disaster after another and the possibility of total annihilation of mankind in the end. What an achievement. It's not the Jesus story. Read it. And for goodness sake, don't worship it, or you'll go the same way. I am come that you might have life, and have it more abundantly. Not mortified, not humiliated, not persecuted out of your mind. God is your heavenly Dad, Abba, Father. It's the only name Jesus uses for God. Abba, Dad. That makes you his child. What you going to grow up into? Spiritually. Fantastic. Unimaginably, wonderfully fantastic. Just like God. Because you're a child of God. The creator of all loves you. Wow. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Christian story picks up every miracle and amazing tale and teaching of the ancient world and casts it in a totally new light, one of loving kindness, a God most beautiful and perfect, and you his child. I'm come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. Read John 17 in particular. You'll become sensitive to what is in the story and what was not in the original story. You'll just know as you read it. When you know your God, this is life eternal, to know thee, the only true God. And Jesus Christ, whom he has sent, messenger and prophet, not himself, not God to be worshipped, the messenger to be heard, of a loving God, a wonderful God, your heavenly Dad. I am come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. If you read something in the story about judgment and condemnation, if you read something like, woe unto you scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, it's not of Jesus. Even if it's in the story, you know it's not of Jesus. And perhaps it's just sown the seeds of hating Jews for 2,000 years. When you read that Pilate was a nice chap, really, and he washed his hands of the whole business, he was innocent. You know it was just to put the Romans in a good light, so that this religion could become a very acceptable Roman religion. When you hear, I have not come to bring peace upon the earth, surely you know in your heart that your God is a God of peace and of joy, not a God of condemnation and blame, rift and division. You really think a loving dad wants that sort of eternal rift? You really think a loving dad wants some of his children to feel spiritually superior and elite and utterly separate from the rest of his children? What sort of a family do you see as heavenly? If you take a Christian view, you get a Christian world of the last 2,000 years. The way it's going, it can only be by the grace of God that we survive at all. We murder each other, leave alone the unchristian. We treat them just as a resource to be used or discarded according to our national prioritization. We are, in the way we behave, indistinguishable from every murderous country on the planet. Greatest warmongers of the last few centuries have been the Christian nations, who have now supposedly abandoned their Christian heritage in a holocaust of cold wars that seem to avoid hurting themselves, but in fact could destroy the whole planet. We are indeed the evidence of a people that have not heard the Jesus story. I'm come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. The one who starts the prayer with Father, the one who finishes John 17 with, and I have declared unto them thy name, and will declare it, that the love wherewith thou hast loved me may be in them, and I in them. You can't believe he's talking about the Christian religion, can you? How absurd. I rest my case. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.